Hey everyone, how's it going? Today, I've got 4 creepy stories about the beach to share with you all. If you've planned a cool beach trip this summer, be careful of the things lurking beneath the sea. The long nails in the sea. It happened 3 years ago when my family went to a campsite on the beach to play. The campsite was on a cliff, and from there down the stairs there was a clean sandy beach. Besides us, there were many people who came to camp, and because the sandy beach itself was a popular spot, many people came to play. And it was quite crowded anyway. At that time, my younger brother was a sophomore in middle school, and he had a bit of rebellion because he was an adolescent boy. So he refused to go even though it was a family trip. Daddy forced him into the car and brought him to the campsite. After arriving, he was still sulking. I asked my younger brother to swim and play together, but he fell alone, walked on the gravel under the cliff, and went out to a buoy in the sea and swam alone. About an hour or so after, when we started playing in the water around noon, he shouted something from the buoy. When I got closer to him in a rubber boat, and I found him hanging from the buoy, trembling his body with a pale face. I thought it was strange, so I went closer and asked, "Hey, why? Are you cramped in your leg?" A person pulled my arm. My younger brother tried to say something. I couldn't understand what he was saying, so I lifted my younger brother from the buoy to the top of the buoy. Upon closer inspection, I noticed that his brother's left forearm was bleeding profusely. I kept trying to ask why this happened, but people, he mumbled like this, and without knowing the reason, I brought him to the beach. Then, I carried him to the campsite on the cliff, laid him down in the tent, and barely healed his arm. The wound was about 2 centimeters long, and it had pierced the arm. The younger brother said after getting some stability, he said that while adroit swimming in the sea near the buoy, he saw a child floating on the water nearby. He said that he thought about how a young child had come here by himself and thought something odd. For some reason, he felt like he shouldn't make eye contact, and if he made eye contact with something, it felt like he was going to die. As he was closing his eyes, he said that he suddenly felt a strange, unknown atmosphere approaching. When he opened his eyes, he could see the child again, and if he didn't run away quickly, he felt like he was going to be caught and killed. Still, he said he couldn't swim because he was afraid. So he hung on a buoy and desperately asked me for help. He kept closing his eyes until he heard my voice. When he opened his eyes with peace of mind at the sound of my voice, a child with a half-melted face was hanging from his brother's left arm. The child was stabbing my brother's arm with her fingers, and her hair was wrapped around his body. If it wasn't for that buoy, I was be dead. While saying this, my brother cried out loud. But when I hoisted him onto the boat, he had no hair on his body, and the wound on his arm could not be a finger piercing. Perhaps it was rare, but there was a fish sharp enough to penetrate even a wetsuit. So I thought he was struck by that. Well, I thought he had a dream or something. About 2 weeks after returning from the campsite, my brother's wounds were getting worse and worse. The wound was even festered and swollen to a terrifying degree. When I took him to the hospital, the doctor said that there is probably a foreign object in the wound, so the wound is festering. He said that it would be healed immediately if he extracted it with a simple operation. So my brother underwent surgery on the same day. So many hours have passed. The foreign objects that the doctor showed me from my brother's arm were a large bundle of long hair and raw fingernails that looked like they had been pulled out whole. Since then, my brother is fortunately doing well without any problems, but he is just trying not to go to the sea at all. I still can't believe the little girl he told me, but I still get goosebumps when I think of the bloody bundles of hair and raw nails the doctor showed me. The hide-and-seek game at the beach. This story happened when I was 16. I was living in a small town on the east coast of the US. Our town was once much bigger and more exciting, back when living in a port city bordering the Atlantic Ocean still meant something. But it had lost much of its charm and population during the early 1900s. And, while I was growing up, it only had about 3,000 to 4,500 residents. Most of its inhabitants were retired pensioners, looking to spend their final decades in a place where you could feel the sting of salt water and watch ships pass on a distant horizon. As such, I only had one real friend as a teenage boy in that crusty old town, Marcus. Marcus and I were the same age, and, after he moved next door when I was 10, we soon became utterly inseparable. He was my best friend, my confidant, almost like the brother that I never had. We would spend the warm summer days splashing in the ocean, chasing each other out to the pier, and fooling around in a treehouse that we built together when we were 13. As we got older, our curfews were extended, and we began to hang out and play games at night as well. It is on one of these nights that my story takes place. This particular day, Marcus and I had both been cooped up doing chores while the sun was out. And, by the time that we could finally meet up at the gap in the old metal fence where the beach could be accessed, the sky was already the dark purple indigo of late twilight. Marcus was buzzing with excitement when I met him. And, as we walked down to where the water hissed against the rocky shore, he explained this new game that he had created. It was a cross between hide-and-seek and tag, and the rules were simple. One person would run off and hide somewhere on the beach, and, after counting for 1 minute, the other person would come and find them, using a flashlight that he had brought from home. When the light from the flashlight hit the hider, they would run, and the other person would chase them until they either caught them or gave up. Then the roles would reverse and we would play again. We played a few rounds without incident, but on probably our fourth or fifth round, everything went wrong. I was seeking, and as I turned my back and started counting, Marcus ran off quickly into the inky darkness of the beach. Unlike the other rounds, however, I started to hear weird sounds at about the 20-second mark. First, there was a lot of splashing, and I chuckled, thinking that Marcus had probably tripped and fallen into the water. The next sounds were more concerning. It sounded like something heavy falling to the sand. Then a struggle. Then a choked gasp. And then silence. I was worried, but I figured that Marcus was just trying to mess with me, and I started after him after my countdown had finished. As I swept my flashlight along the beach, I was surprised that the light hit him after only a few seconds of walking, as it looked like he was just standing, facing the water, a couple of yards from where we had started. He didn't start running, just kept staring out across the dark ocean. "Marcus?" I whispered softly as I crept closer to him. And just like that, his head whipped around to face me. And then it was my turn to run. I ran back through the dark neighborhoods as fast as my sneakered feet could take me, conscious of the second beat of footsteps just behind me. I knew all too well that, in my hurry to flee the beach, I had failed to pick up my wallet and keys from where I had left them by the fence gap, and I wouldn't be able to get back in my house. Luckily, I spotted my saving grace hanging from the oak tree in my front yard, swinging gently in the night breeze, the ladder to our treehouse. How I managed to keep my limbs steady enough to climb the ladder and pull it back up before that thing reached me, I don't know, but I do know that as I leaned against the far wall of the treehouse and panted, legs and lungs aching from my sprint, I heard Marcus stop at the base of the tree. I didn't dare look down, but I know that it stayed there all night. I know this because it started whistling. Its whistle was horrible, halting and watery, but still somehow clear enough to be eerily melodic. Whatever it was whistling was a song of its own design, or at least a song I didn't know, and it continued to whistle until just before dawn, at which point I heard its song retreating back in the direction of the sea. I don't know when it was that my parents found me, shaking and inconsolable in my old rotting treehouse. I don't know when it was that Marcus' parents raised the alarm, sending the whole town searching for the missing boy. And I don't know exactly how many months it was before it was called off, and Marcus was declared dead. But I do know that their search was in vain. They were never going to find Marcus alive, and I doubt that they ever stood a chance of finding him dead either. I hope that whatever it was that emerged from the sea that night and took my friend went right back to the depths that it came from, and I hope that it never returns. I only saw its face for a second, but that second will stick in my mind forever. Its skin was bluish gray and starting to come loose in places. Its jaw hung open, and its swollen, purple tongue hung out of its mouth like a gigantic dead slug. And its eyes were glassy, dark-circled and bulging out of its gaunt skull. It looked drowned. The Howling. My normal jogging routine during weekends consists of waking up before sunrise and without eating breakfast, get out and jog to the beach, which is roughly 20 minutes away if you run at half speed. Once there, I do sprints in intervals and focus on my breathing. The solitude and sounds of softly crashing waves give off a calming sensation, which I find helps me center my mind. The beach at this time is, as you can imagine, empty and lit only by moonlight. The stretch of sand goes as far as the eyes can see. In the more populated areas, there are beach houses that can be seen, as if they are peeking at the sea from the hills that protrude over the beach. But I prefer the more secluded sections that are further along, where there is nothing but forestation connected to the beachside. This moonlit jogging tour went as expected. I did my jogging through the first bit, focusing my thoughts on inhaling and exhaling. Once I got to the forest area, I started my heavy sprinting. I got about 3 intervals in before an interruption occurred for my ears to hear, however. The sound of what I can only describe as howling, but from a man. The sound emitted from the deep and dark bushes and trees to the left of me. A wave of shock struck me, and I almost froze, staring at the what now seemed like pitch-black forest. The beast-like screams abruptly stopped, and the now deafening silence crept onto the sand. This is when I decided that my interval training should continue the way I came, and that the next resting set was far from here. I ran with all my might, feeling my knees weakening by the cumbersome task of traversing on sand. For a stretch of 5 minutes, I went full throttle, only then deciding to have a breather. My heart was pounding and lungs grasping for air. My eyes were still curious of where the sound came from though, so I turned around for a quick glance. To my dismay, a figure of man-like proportions was on its hind legs, much like a person. He was idly standing right on the beach about 100 feet away. I could see his golden eyes shining through the moonlight like that of a feline. A rushing feeling of dread overtook me, and I started to walk backwards in fear. It was only then that the howling started again. As he was screaming like a possessed goat, he started putting his arms forwards on the sand, his elbows bending the wrong way. It started leaning down to take the shape of a quadrupedal. The image of a naked man crawling on the beach in pure darkness, while emitting a sound fit for a farm animal, was almost comical, but also uncannily morbid. I wanted none of this nightmare, and started to sprint for my life. Throughout the escape, my ears picked up the heavy breathing and splashing of sand behind me, slowly gaining speed on me. The closer the splashing got, the more eager the sounds of the breathing seemed to be. I ran for as far as my legs could take me, reaching the beach houses on my right. The sounds behind me slowed down, but I kept on running until I came across the exit and ran for a bit more after that. The sun was slowly waking up, sending small beams of light over the horizon. That made me feel safer. But in my mind, I was not in the clear until I reached the safety of my home. Once there, I could finally calm down and have breakfast. As I thought about what happened, it struck me. Who would I tell about this unnatural sighting to? And would they even believe me? The feeder at the beach. I've always loved the beach. It was a home away from home for me. I had always planned to move there after college to find a teaching job, though until then I rented or stayed in hotels right on the beach for the best access. I was 23, enjoying the beach for summer break when this event happened. My boyfriend, Matt, had rented us a beach house a few miles away from anything else. A nearby lighthouse was nearby, lighting up a portion of the beach. A few homes were to the right of us, but other than that we were pretty secluded. Matt had rented the house for about 12 days. It was $20 a night, which was pretty amazing. So we jumped at the opportunity. It was the 8th day of us being there. We were enjoying the water, the sunshine, and the breeze that would blow in. Around 5:30 p.m., we headed back to the house from one of our daily walks. The sun was still fairly high, but hunger was driving us back. Matt had bought crab legs one day while in town, and he decided that tonight we'd dig into them. It would take a few hours to steam them. So in the meantime, I headed upstairs to shower and grab a book. I ended up on the 2nd floor balcony overlooking the vast beach. The sound of the waves and gulls overhead almost lulled me to sleep. It was dark by the time the smell of dinner got me to look up from my book. "Babe, dinner's good. Come on down." I heard Matt calling out to me. I got up from the lounge chair. As I was making to turn for the door, though, I noticed something out in the waves. At first, I thought it was debris. Driftwood constantly wash up on shore. Shrugging it off, I decided to ignore it until it finally hit the beach. Out of curiosity, I leaned over the railing to get a better look at it. It was at least a few hundred feet away, and the darkness made it difficult, though the distant light of the lighthouse gave some source of light. Once it got a bit onto the beach, I realized it was kind of long. It had the bent angles and color of driftwood, but I just knew it wasn't. I got that confirmation when I saw one of the longer parts start to bend upwards. It had to have been an arm. I didn't realize how still I had become until my boyfriend called for me again. But that shout only caused whatever was on the beach to slowly hoist itself up. It looked to resting on elbows, head, was lowered, still on the ground, while what I assumed to be a head, it must have been long, as it seemed half of it was still in the water. I have never been easily frightened. I have read stories on here that have made me shiver, but never made me sleep with the lights on. But two things happened that had me wishing this was just some story. The lighthouse's beam of light hit the beach again the exact moment this whatever it was lifted its head. It's hard to describe what the brain can comprehend. It was like a creature from the movie The Mist, mixed with Freddy Krueger, mixed with the deepest pit of hell. But that was what my head compared it to. That was made my feet finally start to move. I flew down the stairs and straight into my boyfriend's arms. "Hey, what's up? I was coming to get you." Matt laughed, but slowly stopped upon seeing my wide eyes and tightening grip on his wrist. "There's something outside, in the water. Babe, it's not right." The quivering in my voice made actual tears leak from my eyes. Matt slowly released me, slowly looking towards the window that happened to face the water, then looked back at me. "You sure it wasn't something else? Maybe you dreamed it?" Matt said. I knew he was trying to calm me down. He didn't want to see me in hysterics. But I had to show him. I grabbed his wrist harder and nearly drug him up the stairs and out onto the balcony. I couldn't believe this, but I thanked God that thing's still there. Still laying in the water, stiffly looking around. I pointed to it, motioning Matt to stay quiet. As we watched, I felt Matt grip hand harder, and we saw the thing slowly reach its stick-thin arm out, grip the wet sand, and pull. It dragged itself slowly out of the water. Once out, I got a better look at how long it was. It was huge, 10 feet maybe. It lifted its head higher, jerking it around, its many eyes scanning. What the hell is it doing? Matt had slightly put himself in front of me, but I could feel the panic dripping off him. We got our answer a heartbeat later, and its dragging got quicker heading up the beach, towards the house. My blood went cold despite the warm air when it dawned on me. Our walk from earlier. It was smelling our trail. "Get your gun, Matt, now," I shouted. We both ran like hell back into the room to lock the door. The closer it came, the louder the dragging sound got. It truly felt like we were being hunted, that our peaceful vacation was going to end in our death. Matt walked onto the balcony, prepared to shoot the damn thing, when a screech rang out. It sounded deep but high-pitched at the same time. It was quick and was over in 5 seconds. I started crying then. Full heavy sobs. The screech came from right below the balcony. Matt ran back in and hovered right in front of me and stayed like that for hours. While down below, scratches and screeches overpowered the sound of the waves. Somehow exhaustion came, and I was jolted awake by the cries of gulls. "It's gone." I looked over to see Matt looking towards the water. I slowly walked over and, yes, it was gone. We slowly and cautiously made our way downstairs and outside. The wall beneath the balcony had large gouges in it. As we walked down the beach, we noticed the drag marks, wide and deep. It started from the waves, went to the house, to each window, then back down into the water. We left that day. We didn't give a damn about the remaining 3 days. That thing had our scent. It was hungry last night. It left hungry. And we seriously didn't want to stay and find out if it still was.